Hey everyone, welcome back. In this video, if you've watched my previous shopping cart tutorial video where I make a shopping cart using React, I've had a couple of people have asked me, how do I actually persist the cart? So for example, if I were to add some items here, like 2 blankets, notice that they're in the cart, but if I refresh the page, they get wiped out because we're not storing that data anywhere. So one solution you can do is to just store those items inside of local storage. So that's what I'm going to show you how to do. It's really straightforward. The way I would do it, the way I would achieve it for this small little tutorial is we just want to make sure to persist this cart state to local storage whenever it changes. And then when the application loads, we want to fetch it from local storage and use that as our initial default state variable. Okay, so first of all, let's try to store it when it changes. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to use a hook called useEffect and scaffold out that. We don't need a cleanup function. And what we want to do is for useEffect, you can basically provide it a variable here, which is going to basically watch that scoped variable and just refresh or rerun this function whenever something changes. So as an example, if I pass it cart in this array, whenever the cart object changes at all, it's going to rerun whatever's inside of this function here, okay? So the second thing we want to do is, since the cart object is changing, we want to store that into local storage. So I'm going to say localStorage.putItem, or sorry, it's called setItem actually. And we can provide a key, so I'm going to call it cart. And the second argument is going to have to be a string, so we can just do a json.stringify and pass it the cart. And make sure you import the useEffect if you haven't imported it. Okay, so just to kind of demo that, let me turn off my webcam so you can see what I'm talking about. Down here in my DevTools, you'll see that we have cart in our local storage. I'm going to go ahead and just clear that out because that was probably from something else. But notice that when the application first loads, when I refresh the page, it's storing a default empty array. And that is because state is starting off as an empty array. This effect is going to fire. But what I'm trying to demo is if I go in here and add a blanket, notice that it went ahead and just updated my local storage with that blanket. And I can go over here and add a couple of batteries too, and you'll notice here that we have home and garden with a blanket with a quantity of 1, and we also have a battery with quantity of 2, and that is reflected if I go to my cart. So the second part of storing something in local storage is we need to fetch it back when the application loads. So one way you can do that is up here above the functional component. I'm going to say const cart from local storage, and I just want to fetch that JSON object that we stored earlier. But since this is a string, we stringified it, we need to kind of pull it back and parse it. So I'm going to say json.parse, and I'm going to say localStorage.getItem. And again, I'm going to pass it the cart key because that is the key that is kind of referencing that local storage object. Now, one thing I like to do is, if it's a new user using your app, this might not be set, right? So what you want to do is you want to fall back on your default state. In this case, I could fall back on the string of an array so that when we try to parse it, it's going to parse an empty array. This will be set to an empty array. And the last step is we just need to default our state here. So you know how before we were setting this to an empty array? Well, now we want to set it to whatever we got from local storage. So if I save this, notice that when I refresh this tab, we still have the same amount of items. And if I go in here and change stuff and refresh the page again, it's going to reload that from local storage and display it in our app. So recap, you just need an effect. You watch some state variable and write the local storage. And when the app loads, you load that default state from local storage and put it back in your state. Super straightforward. There are some gotchas with local storage. There's a max amount of things you can store in local storage, so keep that in mind. I think it's like 1 megabyte or 4 megabytes. Or something less, I don't know. Let's see, max local storage size. Looks like either 10 or 2 megabytes. So you can store quite a lot of data in local storage, but at the end of the day, if you're using like a large application, you might want to use cookies. But yeah, that's how you do it. So I've had a couple of people ask me how you do that with local storage and how do you persist the cart when the page closes or refreshes, and that is exactly how you do it with this small little tutorial application example. So if you like this video, be sure to subscribe and give me a thumbs up and comment if you thought this was useful.